Tuning in with KrASIA, bringing human stories to life. Welcome to another episode of Tuning In by KrASIA. I'm Emily Feng, your host for this episode. Virginia Tan is the founding partner of Teja Ventures, the first gender lens venture capital fund for emerging Asia, targeting early-stage tech companies for the she economy. She also founded She Loves Tech, the world's largest startup competition for women and technology, and she is also the founder of Lean In China, a women's platform with over 100,000 members. We get the chance to pick her brain on where the she economy is headed. Hey Virginia, so glad to have you here. Thanks for taking the time to be on this podcast.
Delighted to be here with you.
Yeah. Firstly, I just want to dig deeper into more of who you are and your background. So I know you've been involved with She Loves Tech, Lean In China, and you're also the founding partner and CEO of Teja Ventures. So you obviously do so much. I'm curious to know what has been more of like the motivating factors of your advocacy and participation in gender lens investing. And maybe you can tell us a personal story or give us examples from your own experience in work.
Absolutely. My background actually is in law and finance. I specialized for more than 10 years in my early career in investments into emerging markets. Mm-hmm. But actually, when I think back on the key motivating factor of sort of why I'm building Teja Ventures today, being the first gender lens VC fund in emerging Asia, I look back to a time before I actually even started my corporate career. When I was 22, I took a gap year right after graduating from law school. Mm-hmm. And I spent that one gap year actually working in third world countries. My interest was very much in what was in women. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to understand as a young woman what I could do, where I could contribute. I spent time in post-Civil War Nepal.
Oh, wow.
And I spent time in the slums of South America. Mm-hmm. I worked with women from an economic, social, from a political angle. And I started to realize actually that in many ways, I think there never seemed to be enough funding, so to speak, for us to essentially really solve a lot of the problems and challenges that women faced. And I didn't really understand why. When I went back to actually begin my corporate career, obviously I was used to doing conventional finance deals, out of London, out of the Middle East, and then later out of China. But a lot of the time, I spent thinking about how we could use mainstream finance to finance certain socially desirable outcomes. And I think that period of my life also coincided with the rise of what I call social finance, coming out of places like London at the time. I started to develop a very, very unique perspective of how we could use our skills as professionals to really shape the way I think mainstream finance could support sort of social type outcomes. So that was a very strong interest of mine. When I think of Lean In China, She Loves Tech, and actually Teja Ventures, I think the whole journey into essentially founding and building these organizations in many ways was a great accident. So I moved to China in 2013 to work on investments on the One Belt One Road. Mm-hmm. And while I was actually in Beijing, a group of women and I, we decided to start building communities for women. And we started off with 10 people, then 100, then 1,000. And before I knew it, in less than 3 years, we had 100,000 people spread across 30 cities in China.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's when I first started to understand what I call the power of the she economy. Mm-hmm. Understanding how there's a new wave of consciousness with young women, understanding the way technology and communities, changing the way that we consume, the way we live, understanding these aspirations and these sort of new types of consumption patterns. And then I think as Lean In China, I started to build Lean In China full time. Mm-hmm. It grew into one of China's best known nonprofit communities for women. Mm-hmm. And out of that, actually, we incubated She Loves Tech, which is now the largest startup competition for women in technology in the whole world. This year, we were in 30 countries in 6 continents, and we started off with a tiny event of about 100 people in 2015. Because of She Loves Tech, I started to see women building technology or men and women building technology to impact women positively. I started to see thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs and types of technology from across the world, right? Mm-hmm. And I think in the beginning, I don't think I ever really saw myself as an entrepreneur, a technologist, or as an investor. Mm-hmm. I started to angel invest, in some of the She Loves Tech startups because I genuinely wanted to help some of these entrepreneurs. I thought they were incredible. They were doing incredible things. And capital to me was the most sincere form of support. Put your money where your mouth is, which I still believe in very much today. And then I think really top tier funds like Sequoia, like Vertex, like Amazon started to put money into She Loves Tech startups. And that's when I realized actually, hey, there was a real, I think, untapped commercial opportunity that we were missing here. And that gave birth to the rise of Teja Ventures, which invests in technology for the she economy. But when you ask me about what motivates me and these motivating factors, I think back to my time as a young woman, age 22, naive and fresh and idealistic. And I think of how this journey has shown me how technology can essentially change the game for women. I think that technology is a great leveler for women, but at the same time, I think my experience in China made me realize that women were not just beneficiaries of technology, they were also economic drivers. They were economic drivers in new business models, which have been caused by the rise of the internet economy. And to me, I built Teja Ventures because I wanted to build that investment case for women because I realized that technology could solve a lot of these issues. But at the same time, to me, it was a clear economic opportunity, not just a social one.
That's great. I also wanted to know more because you spoke about being in China and kind of building out Lean in China as well. So I assume, you're very familiar with that space. Curious to know, what part of Asia do you think is moving the quickest to support the she economy? Would you say it's China? Or, what other countries have you seen that's already kind of pushing this movement forward?
I think China, to me, was the clearest business case for the she economy that I've ever seen. So many, of the unicorns. When you look closely at who was really driving growth and revenue, it was women as a demographic, women as consumers, women as online traffic, women as a mobile workforce. And, whether it was in the mother-baby space, whether it was in the content-driven social commerce space, whether it was in the e-commerce space, whether it was in the ed tech space, whether it was in the med tech space, digital health space, there were so many, there are a couple of classic behaviors, right? Women control 80% of discretionary spending, sometimes even more. Women were first adopters of new types of consumption behavior. Women were more likely to buy online, more likely to buy socially, more likely to buy through communities. This is what I believe is the future of retail. Women were a big asset in terms of a mobile workforce because we've always had to balance life and work. So essentially the move towards contingent work because of a digital economy actually benefited women, right? Gave them more economic opportunities. So yes, I saw this first in China in terms of the internet business models, which actually, became unicorns, like Xiaohongshu, like Red, like VIP Kid, Pinduoduo, like Wuhan. So there were a lot of things that we saw there. But I actually see these trends being replicated actually across, for example, Southeast Asia as a start. I see there's a lot of potential for that in South Asia as well. But I definitely see it a lot in parts of Southeast Asia, where women, for example, in Southeast Asia, like Philippines, Myanmar, like Indonesia, women play a big part, even in, like, for example, mom and pop stores. Women are running the inventory and the finances, men are doing the more physical part. So I think in recent years, definitely has been greater awareness on gender lens investing. I also think that one of the reasons why I built Teja Ventures is because I wanted to change the dialogue around what is gender lens investing. I think when people think of gender lens investing, the first thing they just think about is that, okay, we invest into women entrepreneurs, which of course Teja does. 60% of our portfolio is women entrepreneurs. We also invest in male entrepreneurs. We invest in the best entrepreneurs, essentially. But for me, what I wanted to change the dialogue is I wanted to see how the she economy and women as a demographic as a whole was actually a real economic opportunity. I wanted to show people how technology can both benefit, but also be driven by women as an entire demographic. What kind of technology can serve the consumer needs of millions of women users, and how women users can be a conduit to new markets, not just as an end to themselves, but a means to new markets as first adopters of new consumption behavior. Also, in many ways, I think in the last 2 years, I think you've seen a huge spike in gender lens investing across the world, many new funds being set up. But I feel like we have to look past just the gender identity of an entrepreneur. And for me, for Teja, I think it's to really look at the technology or business model or product doing for women as a whole. Are we addressing needs that haven't been addressed in the healthcare space, in the consumption space? Are we bringing women as a mobile workforce more income? Are we providing better or more affordable consumer options? Are we serving the unserved women consumer who buys not just for herself, but also for her household and for her communities? So I see this as a very, very, I think there's a lot more openness to gender lens investing. It used to be seen as a very niche thing. And yeah, definitely we are influenced by a lot of the business models that we've seen coming out of China and now are starting to apply to the rest of Asia. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. I guess out of gender lens investing, what have you seen coming from women entrepreneurs that are quite exciting and new, right? So I think for example, I know a lot of apps have been coming out around fertility or even tracking birth cycles or things that are geared towards women's health. From your perspective, because you probably look at so many different new companies to invest in, what are things that excite you about the innovation coming out from the she economy?
I mean, at She Loves Tech, our startup competition for women in tech, we look at 3,000 deals a year alone just from the competition.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I think to me, women entrepreneurs represent a new generation of disruptive thinking, of innovation. I don't just see innovation coming out for the she economy. I see innovation coming out in general. And so I think there are 2 points that I want to make here, right? I think what I see women entrepreneurs creating, I've seen in my competition everything from space tech, autonomous driving, med tech, agri-tech, fintech, IoT, cybersecurity. We've seen almost every kind of vertical. Some of the things that have really stuck out for me the last couple of years has been like voice technology for the disabled, driven by artificial intelligence, autonomous driving simulations, nanotechnology for cancer, using voice data to detect cardiovascular diseases, etc., respiratory diseases, for example. This year, there's been a lot of alternative proteins. We're seeing a lot of med tech across the board, and we see a lot of ed tech as well and fintech. So I think that's what I see in general, particularly in the she economy. I see a couple of things. I think I'm starting to see a lot more new types of direct-to-consumer products, right? Beauty and wellness to food. Focus on the brand side of things. I'm seeing, like what you said, more women's health stuff, menstruation to menopause, to fertility, to hygiene. So that's another area that we're starting to look at. I see a lot of what I call new retail models, especially on the intersection between technology and sustainability. I think it's very exciting. Whether it's forms of packaging, sort of refillable forms of retail. I see quite a lot of social commerce, models which leverage upon women as not just buyers and sellers, but also agents and distribution points. Something that we're very bullish about. We believe that's the future of retail. I'm seeing a lot of, for example, last mile distribution. How do you serve 5 billion untapped consumers? Because most technology was built for the first 2 billion, etc. So there's a lot of innovation that we're seeing both in general and also for the she economy. And I mean, like I said, for me, the gender identity of the entrepreneur is actually less relevant. Judge the entrepreneur on what he or she are building, not their identity. It's quite relevant, actually. Judge them on their ability, on their potential, and on their attraction. Absolutely.
I think that's great. I think it's also the fact, though, like money in a sense is a large resource that many women entrepreneurs aren't able to receive. So I think the fact that Teja Ventures, you guys are very focused on this area, essentially like giving them power to like build out their business and figure out ways to address issues and provide solutions in areas that they're experiencing or like women are experiencing. So I think it's great.
I think what we need to understand about the she economy is that it's broader than we think. I think the first step is to address, issues that women are facing, right?
Yep.
So you're addressing women directly. Like, for example, things like menstruation, fertility, these are things that only women can actually experience and need.
Yep.
But when you look at the she economy broadly, you need to think about women as conduits to new markets. So, for example, are women buying just for themselves? Or are they buying, for example, let's take healthy food. Healthy food is for everybody. But when you look at the actual data, women are actually the majority of people of consumers buying healthy food for themselves and their families. They're first adopters. When you look at digital health, women are more likely than men to seek health information online. They're more likely to procure pharmaceutical purchases online. They're more likely to change their diet. So I think we need to see women not just as ends in themselves, but you really need to see them as a conduit to a larger market. And then when you look at women's consumption behavior, it's different from men's. You need to look at the virality of it. You need to understand what that means for a company in terms of retention, long-term value. Like I said, I think the she economy needs to go beyond milk bottles and tampons, so to speak.
Yeah, I completely agree. Would you say that women also have a more different way of thinking in business, that they have more empathy, or the way of thinking of creating a solution to a problem in an industry is very different? And in that way, it's, I guess, more helpful to like the broader she economy?
I mean, I hate generalizing,
yeah,
but I do think that there are nuances to the way men and women build businesses. Obviously, there are going to be exceptions to every rule. I mean, what I noticed, for example, was that when women build businesses, a lot of times the desire to contribute back to society in some way, the social part of it is actually very important.
Yeah.
It's not just a pure financial driver.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing. The second thing that I see is that women actually in many ways are much more revenue focused. They play less of a capital game. They're much more focused on revenue and sustainability. And I think that's also historically because they've been able to raise less money. So therefore, for their survival, revenue and sustainability is actually much more important.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times when I work with founders, I have to actually tell them that sometimes venture capital, your revenue is not your only way that you raise money. And a lot of times we need to ask ourselves, are we funding people on their potential, or are we funding people just on their track record? I'm very hesitant to use the word bias or discrimination without anecdotal evidence, but I often feel that women are usually judged on their track record.
Yeah.
And we often, I think, fund men on their potential. And that's a big discrepancy, I think, in the valuations and the amount of money that people raise.
Mm-hmm.
So women have historically been more comfortable taking debt versus equity, as an example, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, these are just some examples of, I think, the differences and the nuances that I think generally speaking that I see when men and women build businesses. But, I also think that as a venture capitalist, my job really is to understand and unlock value, to understand the drivers, what value drivers are.
Mm-hmm.
And that means seeing past, gender, first of all, really understanding these nuances, understanding the potential of founders, and really backing them. And I think the data that She Loves Tech has collected over the last 6 years has been invaluable. We worked with hundreds and hundreds of founders, understanding the way they think, understanding the challenges they face, and understanding some of the solutions, that will help them. I mean, to be honest with you, I think if there was one single problem that She Loves Tech is dedicated to actually solving, it must be in resolving the gender funding gap. Because I think there's been a lot published about it. Women get 2%, 3% of global venture funding, but not enough about the reasons. And the reasons, to be honest, go beyond discrimination based on gender identity. It goes beyond that. Maybe in the West, when, so to speak, believe that discrimination is actually more entrenched, but I believe it goes beyond that. We need to try to understand the nuances of why we fund some people and why we don't fund others.
Yeah. For the data on that She Loves Tech is collecting, is that data public, like on the website?
We haven't publicized it. We're hoping to publish it next year.
Cool. Thank you. That was a really great response and definitely has made me want to think this more thoroughly too. So my last question is more around your own personal experience building a fund, Teja Ventures. So as you've kind of, gone through this line of work, what advice would you also give to maybe like fund managers who also want to focus in this area? What advice would you give to them?
Great question. I often have a private joke. I've been fundraising for, the last year or so, but in many ways, I think the fund is raising me. Yeah. You learn so much by doing. I mean, I think there's no better way than learning by doing, right? I mean, I think of myself at the beginning and how much more I know now. And maybe if I had known all that stuff at the beginning, maybe I would have been a lot more intimidated. But I think in life, you want to do something, you just got to go with it. So my advice, I think, is twofold, right? I think one is in people who want to start funds in general, right?
Yeah.
There's general advice, not even a gender lens, fund. Very important is to really understand who is going to be the right investor for you. And the key in many ways is to find the right anchor investor. It's not always possible. It's not always possible, but if you find the right anchor investor, your fundraising is going to be a lot easier. I mean, for startups, it's the same. Have the right anchor investor, and your fundraising is going to just go a lot easier. So that I think that's one. That's in general. And I think in terms of gender lens, so people want to start gender lens funds. I think it's about really refining your thesis. Right? There are many gender lenses. Teja focuses on women as a demographic, as a consumer, products which serve women, etc. Women as conduits to new markets, etc. But some gender lens funds, they focus on diversity as a gender lens. So they look at the makeup of the company the most, the entrepreneur. Like I said, we have 60% female entrepreneurs, right? 40% male entrepreneurs. So we try to keep a balance in the fund and be clear actually in your thesis as to why you've chosen that thesis. Have the data for your thesis, make the economic case for it. I think, making the economic case is actually very important. And obviously understand actually the motivations of what your investors are and make sure that you're aligned with those motivations, right? Because there's some investors, they care more about financial returns, others care more about impact, some care about both. I don't like saying that gender lens investing is just part of impact investing. I see gender lens investing as, to me, is a commercial opportunity, but there's also a lot of embedded impact inside. So, be very clear on sort of who your investors are and who you want to be, if you're starting a fund in general, but also gender lens fund. And make sure that you have, strategic advantages in the markets that you choose to operate in. Because without that, it's much harder. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. That's a really great advice. And I feel like, just from talking to you as well, I've learned a lot around gender lens investing. If anyone is listening, how would they be able to reach out to you if they just wanted to chat or connect with you?
They can add me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive on LinkedIn and love meeting people who are interested in the space, investors, entrepreneurs, absolutely. Yeah. I try to do office hours, like Saturday on afternoons in a cafe, with entrepreneurs who want to meet and everything. So yeah, thank you for this and really look forward to the final article and podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much, Virginia. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time.